Total Screen proudly presents their official podcast, OnScreen, with your hosts, Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Hello, everybody, and welcome to OnScreen, the official podcast of the Total Screen. My name is Tyson.
My name is Will.
And today we've got a whole lot of news to go over. We tried to pare it down as much as we could, but there's just a lot that happened and a lot of trailers and stuff that came out that we need to go over. We also are going to be talking about Loki Season 2, which just finished last week. And we have some stuff coming up on the horizon that we're going to bring to your attention. Let's get started right there with our On the Horizon segment.
On the horizon.
On the Horizon is where we talk about stuff coming up in the next week or so, and we're going to be starting off with Fargo, which returns to FX on Tuesday, November 21st. So Fargo, every season's it's like seasonal anthologies. Every season's like a self-contained story. They've all been really good. This one looks good too. It's much less marketed, I think, than previous seasons. I haven't seen a ton of marketing for this season. It kind of snuck up on me.
Yeah.
It still looks good from the trailers and stuff I've seen, but next up, also on Tuesday, November 21st, Obituary is coming to Hulu. This is an Irish comedy about an obituary writer turned murderer. She discovers, apparently, that she can make more money as an obituary writer by creating more murders that then need obituaries written about them. So it's a very dark comedy from Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
Then on Wednesday, November 22nd, Good Burger 2 comes to Paramount Plus. They did a movie adaptation of it was an All That skit, and then it turned into its own show. Then it got a movie, and now, decades later, it's getting a sequel movie on Paramount Plus. We talked about this, I think, last week about how there's when we talked about Monk returning, that there's this thing about bringing back old franchises that are beloved that's been happening a lot recently, and this is another example of that.
Yeah.
Next up, we have two back-to-back things that are coming out literally a day apart that have almost identical names, both to Netflix. So first on Thursday, November 23rd, My Daemon, which is a new anime, comes out on Netflix. And then on Friday, November 24th, a foreign series called My Demon comes to Netflix. So Netflix just trying to confuse us.
Mm-hmm.
Napoleon also comes out on Friday, November 24th to movie theaters, as does the new Disney movie Wish, which is from the team that did Frozen and stuff at Disney. So those are both out on November 24th on Friday. Black Friday, actually.
Oh.
And that is it. That is it for On the Horizon. Now we're going to move on to On Beat. On Beat is our news segment. We have several news stories to go over. Then Netflix had something called Geek Week, so we have trailers and other announcements to talk about there. And then there were just some other trailers that came out within the last week as well that we're going to go over. But let's start with the news. So after the strike resolution with the SAG-AFTRA strike, James Gunn announced that Superman Legacy will retain its original July 11th, 2025 release, that everything's been going full speed ahead. I don't think they announced the release before, but apparently this was the original release. They just hadn't announced it, I think, unless they did announce it. I don't know.
I believe they announced this, and then they originally announced this as release date, I believe. So really, it's a confirmation that after the strike ends, they're able to retain that release date.
Okay, so that's the first piece of news. Next up is that Warner Bros. This is a developing story. It changed,
there was more Superman Legacy news, where a little bit of casting news. They have Maria Gabriela de Faria, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, to play the engineer, who is a member of the Authority, who is going to apparently figure big in this film. So that's a bit of news that goes along with the confirmation of the release date.
Mm-hmm. And then the next piece of news we have is also related to Warner Brothers, and that is that this is a developing story that's changed like 3 times over the week. It first started out, the story was about how Warner Brothers had written off the Coyote versus Acme animated movie.
David Zaslav up to his old tricks again.
Yeah, this is a very highly rated and regarded by those who've seen it animated movie. It's got a lot of praise to it. It's got really high critical reviews already from people that were able to see it before all of this. And David Zaslav's like, you know what? Let's just write it off and have it disappear forever.
This crap pisses me off. It's
it
like
made me see red when this story came out.
And you know, we're not the only ones. There was a large internet outcry. Now I see like huge patches of Twitter like patting themselves on the back for getting mad, but really where it counts is this upset a lot of creatives who were currently negotiating with Warner Brothers on potential projects. They had meetings on the
especially
books.
very currently because the strike just ended.
Yes.
So this is like a lot of meetings were happening within a very short period of time right after this happened, and they started canceling those meetings.
Yes.
And Warner went like, oh shit, you mean if we like show every sign that like just because we make a movie with us and just because the movie is entirely completed that we might just decide we're not going to release it, that's going to make people not want to work with us?
Right? Yeah, that's going to make people not be able to trust us? Yeah, imagine you're a filmmaker and you're making a deal to make a movie. That movie's going to be what, like 3-4 years, the next 3-4 years of your life or whatever?
Yeah, and 2 things happen from that. Like, some people are like, who cares, they got paid. It's like, well, what was the strike? Besides AI, what was the big thing that the strike was about? It was about residuals.
Yeah, residuals. You get no residuals off of a tax write-off.
Exactly. Yeah. No residuals for a tax write-off of one. So that's the first thing. The second thing is people take pride in their work. Yeah. And they create something, they put a bunch of their life into it, and then that ruins it.
They want people to see it.
And there's a third reason, and this doesn't always apply, but it does sometimes. It did in the case of Batgirl, for example, when that was written off, is that the star of Batgirl, the main character, the main actress playing Batgirl in that movie that got written off and canceled, like, she's a relatively unknown, and this was supposed to be her breakout role. So that's like a whole other layer on top of the other 2 we just mentioned. So it's like, it's 3 levels at least of fucked happening simultaneously.
Oh yeah, it is. And it just, you know, my takeaway from this is David Zaslav is really incompetent at running a studio. Yeah. Like some part of him, like he was so dense because he saw doing this as just easy money to prop up a lousy quarter. But let's face it, their quarterly earnings, you know, were lousy, mostly because of the dual strikes that just happened. Also because, you know, they've had few major hits this year outside of Barbie, which did gangbusters for them. And so, yeah, I think David Zaslav did this to get some quick money to prop up the earnings results.
And then suddenly realized, like, oh shit, like, making a choice like that just burns everybody who works with me is gonna make people not want to work with me?
Right, yeah, exactly. He did not realize that this damages trust, damages the studio's reputation. He didn't seemingly, like, realize this at all. And I don't think, like, he realized it because the last 2 times he did it with Batgirl and Scoob, you know, there didn't seem to be, like, the level of backlash from creatives. Yeah. But what he did realize was it put creatives on edge, but there was a hope that, like, that was a one-time thing. And this is the 3rd time he's done it. So, like, then it becomes like a pattern. It becomes like, okay, this is something that, like, could happen to any of our movies without notice.
And on top of that, it came right after the strike.
Yes.
Which had already had people on edge about studios in general. And then they do this, and it's like, okay, so you're just completely untrustworthy.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
As I mentioned, this is an evolving story. So the second step to the evolution of the story is that they reverse this decision, and they're not putting the movie out, but they've opened it up so that the director and producers can search for another distributor. Apparently, Amazon's interested. I'm sure there's some others that are also interested because it's probably going to be a pretty cheap buy.
They're going to let the filmmakers shop it around And the main reason that they're doing it this way and they're not putting it out is simply because Warner Brothers does not want to pay for the distribution or the marketing or all those costs for this movie. They do not believe in this movie for whatever insane reason.
And they've already pointed out that they don't believe in releasing movies direct to streamers.
Yes. Yeah, David Zaslav is against that. So they won't do it. I don't know. It's weird, but yeah, they don't, but at least it's going to see life somewhere. And I'm going to be honest, it's according to the trades, there's already a bidding war between Amazon, Netflix, and Apple for this. I don't think it's going to be very hard for this to find a new home. So the good news is we are going to be able to see this movie, and at least I'm glad for that.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to bring up before we get into the last evolution of this story is that, and I brought this up to you before the podcast, but I just want to put it on the record too, is that I think there is an easy solution that we should be doing, like the government should be doing in cases like this, where something is being written off that's already completed, that's a piece of art or a craft of any kind, basically. If any company does that, it is my belief that every asset related to that complete project should go into the public domain. If you're going to take a tax write-off for a completed movie, that movie now belongs to the public. So you can't make money on it. Your competitors can't make money on it. It's just there. It's just public domain, and anybody can watch it on YouTube or download a copy or whatever, and it's just there. That's what it should be. If they do something like this, that's what it should be, because essentially the taxpayers are paying for the movie at that point. So it should belong to us. The third evolution of this story is now, as a reaction to this move, a lawmaker has now started investigating, looking into Warner Brothers' activities in doing this, because it is, like, as you mentioned, it is a pattern now, that it's a very anti-competitive and it's an anti-consumer tactic.
Yes, it is. It's anti-competitive, it's anti-consumer, it's anti-filmmaker, and I just don't think, studios or creators should just be able to get free tax write-offs by canceling projects that they've invested in.
I mean, isn't this the plot of that musical, The Producers, the Mel Brooks? The Mel Brooks musical, The Producers. The whole plot was that they specifically made a bomb so that they could write it off, right? And that they'd make more money by making a bomb than by making a hit. And that was like a joke that the entire musical was based on. And here's David Zaslav, like, watching it like it's a TED Talk.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Like The Producers is like his Bible for doing business.
Yeah. Our next news story is a bit of a lighter note, a happier note. I don't know, lighter. It's not really a light themed thing, but
I mean,
it's a series. It's happy. It's good news.
It's happy. It's good news. It's a beloved series making a triumphant return after a long absence.
Yeah, and not something that's like hugely popular either. Something that's got more of a cult fan base, which makes this a little bit more rare than, say, what we mentioned before with like Monk, or what we've mentioned with some of the other things that are
also a subtitle could be Starz is Desperate and going back to like one of their like very few major hits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The show we're talking about, of course, is Spartacus. So if you remember Spartacus, it was a show on Starz. Now, I wanted to ask you, because we've talked about Spartacus before, but we'd both already been, I think we didn't meet each other until that show had already been running for several seasons or something.
Yeah, probably. When did that show come out? That show came out in 2010, I want to say.
It had some delays in production, too, because the lead actor passed away, and he was sick before that, and they were trying to
but that was like
production.
After the first season. So the first season, I want to say like he was in the first and second seasons, and he died before season 3.
He wasn't in the second season was like a spin-off season. The second season took place before the first season.
Okay, I was right. Yeah, it was 2010 that series premiered.
Yeah. That sounds about right. Like I said, the second season, they wrote an entire like spin-off season that took place before the first season so that they wouldn't have to use the actor who was sick at the time in the hopes that he would return for the third season. And then unfortunately he passed away before they were able to start the third season. And then they had to recast it. But all that sad news out of the way, it was a fantastic show. And I think one of the things that's so good about it is that when that show first came on, it just was like a 300 ripoff, basically. It was like trying to ate the visual aesthetic of 300, but it was on TV, and it was Spartacus, which is a no-one story that's not 300, but still kind of like swords and sandals, kind of epic. And it was like, okay, I guess I'll watch this show because it's pretty fun, and there's some graphic violence, and there's some cool stuff in it. And then, like, a certain point, and I can remember, to me, the episode that really sold it to me, where I went like, oh wait, this isn't just like a fun action show. This is like good, like a really good show.
Yeah.
And it was the episode where Spartacus, I think his wife had just been killed in front of him, and he was led to believe that it was something else, and then he got injured, and he started like hallucinating. And I think, you know, like at that point, he put together the pieces of the puzzle and realized that his wife was murdered by his dominus. Like intentionally so that they could keep him under control or something.
Yes.
And that was where I was like, oh shit, this is a really good show. This isn't just like a fun show. This is like, this is good, you know?
This is like, it's funny because, like, it's a really good show masquerading as, like, trash television.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I think the phrase, and I think we both used it several times when we've mentioned the show way in the past, was, it's a show that was better than it had any right being.
Yes.
Like, it should not have been this good, but it was, you know?
Because, like, it definitely had a lot of, like, grindhouse elements to it. But, like, if those films, like, had, like, a really, like, deep and emotional story.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah.
And just lots of plotting and cunning and, you know, like, oh, geez, so good. John Hannah, man, is so good in that show.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
In that show. Oh, yeah.
Everybody was so good. Manu Bennett, man. He put him on our radar.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that is a Spartacus sequel series is coming. It's you referred to it as kind of a what if, because the character that this is going to be following died in the series, in the original series.
So it's like it's a sequel to Spartacus, but it's following like an alternate outcome from like the original. Yeah, because it focuses on Ashur, who's like one of the major villains of the series. He's also like one of the best characters of the series.
Then he's one of the best schemers. There's like
that
show had like 3 or 4 like really good schemers that was like a big part of what made the show entertaining, and he was one of them.
Yeah, and at the end of the series, Ashur dies. He gets killed. This reimagines it. This is sort of like a continuation of the series, only if Ashur did not die.
Yeah, and he's rewarded.
Yes.
He's rewarded for helping to stop Spartacus's slave rebellion, and he's basically freed and given the old gladiator arena that everything started in.
Yeah. So that's why I said I likened this to like What If, because like this is an alternate history sequel to like, if they stuck with canon and made a sequel with the, keeping Ashur dead, it would be a different show. So, yeah.
So that is now in development at Starz. Stephen S. DeKnight, the creator of the show, is returning. He's going to be creating and showrunning it. And the actor who plays Ashur, Nick Tarabay, is returning as well in the titular role.
And that's why I'm excited. Like, you got the original creator and showrunner on board. You got Nick Tarabay on board. I mean, this is a W.
It's a good chance for a return for Stephen S. DeKnight, too, because he made his name with Spartacus, then he did Daredevil, and then he kind of faded into obscurity.
Yeah, he did the first season of Daredevil, which again, like, blew me away.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard much out of him.
He did that Pacific Rim sequel.
Yeah, that's
kind of wasn't really all that well received.
I didn't watch that, by the way, but yeah, I'm a big fan of Stephen S. DeKnight. From like the 2 things I watched, really. Well, I mean, they've both been very high quality, so.
Yeah, so that is exciting, good news. Our next piece of news is that director Destin Daniel Cretton of Shang-Chi, he was originally supposed to be directing Avengers Kang Dynasty. It was like, he was the director picked kind of in the same way that they picked the Russo brothers to direct Infinity War and Endgame after their work on the Captain America series. This was like, okay, this guy's good. He did a good job of Shang-Chi. Let's invest in him to be our new Avengers director.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they have parted ways.
Now, this could be a number of reasons.
Creative differences, probably.
Yeah, creative differences. A lot of people think, kind of like with the rumors swirling and stuff, kind of thinking that maybe this movie's canceled, maybe it's getting completely retooled.
Yeah.
That involved Kang. I'm going to say no. the concept of like Marvel reversing course on the Kang storyline and to a point of like canceling an entire Avengers movie is silly if they do that.
But they could have made changes that Cretton wasn't on board for.
Yeah. I mean, to me, like that concept's silly. If they're doing that, my take is like, you can recast Kang, right? Like, you can recast the character. It's fine. The character isn't like psychically bonded to, the actor for eternity.
And Marvel's done that before, by the way.
Yeah.
They've recast multiple roles. Probably most famously, the two most famous ones being, Edward Norton being recast as the Hulk, and then, I can't even think of his name right now, Rhodey, the original Rhodey, who was recast.
Imagine if we could like have Hulk in anything, because Edward Norton wouldn't do it. It was too difficult to work with, and Marvel just decided, well, can't get Edward Norton on board, so I guess we can't have any more Hulk. It's like, what?
Yeah, so that is unfortunate that they parted ways. There's probably some reason behind it that maybe makes it less unfortunate, like maybe somebody just... I have to imagine, I don't think Marvel was canceling it or getting rid of it entirely, but I think it's probably likely that they wanted to make certain changes, and Cretton was not interested in those.
It's important to note that Cretton is still working with Marvel. He's developing...
Yeah, they don't have bad blood.
Yes.
That's very important to mention, because a lot of times when these things happen, it sounds like a lot of platitudes like, oh, creative differences. Oh, we're just going in different ways. And then they never speak to each other again. That's not what's happening here. That's creative differences.
The Edgar Wright situation where he was attached for Ant-Man, and then, creative differences, air quotes. And then, Edgar Wright never did anything for Marvel.
Yeah. But here, Cretton is still going to be doing Shang-Chi 2, and he's also going to still be doing Wonder Man, which is a Disney Plus series that he was going to be directing and producing.
That's right. That's the other project he's involved in. Yeah.
So both of those are still happening. So that's good news. And our last piece of news is another Marvel piece of news, and pretty unfortunate, and that is that The Marvels has completely bombed at the box office. It pulled in $47 million over the weekend. This is a $200 million budget movie. This is the weakest MCU opening ever.
And it's the weakest opening for a superhero film all year. Like, Flash opened stronger than this.
Yeah. This is not good news.
No, it's not. And there are multiple reasons for this. Again, with something like this, there's not one thing you can point to and fix. There's multiple reasons, whether it's like the quality of the film or the perceived quality of the film for the audience. I haven't seen it myself. I don't know, it seems to be there are people who definitely love it, and then there are people who hate it. So it seems to be a divisive film, first off.
Yeah.
The Rotten Tomatoes score is currently at, 62%? It's in the low 60s, which, is a D.
Yeah.
It's got a B cinema score, which for a movie like this is not a good cinema score. You do not want a B for this.
Yeah, but one thing I will say, I always bring this up because I know people that will refuse to watch movies if they score below a certain average on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, yes.
And the thing I always try to bring up when people say that is that the way Rotten Tomatoes works isn't an aggregate of the score. It's an aggregate of positive versus negative. So that means that 62% of the people that reviewed this, I think that's the number you said, are positive about the movie, and the remaining 38% are negative about the movie. We use the term divisive. Something being divisive means that some people love it, some people dislike it.
Yeah.
It is
and I was looking at the reviews, and that
possible.
seems to be among the reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, that seems to be the case. It seems to be the positive reviews, the ones rated fresh, seem to have effusive praise, and the rotten reviews seem to be the polar opposite. Seem to be oh, this movie's got problems.
So a good example of this I've brought up with friends before when I've talked to them about how this works is that I think it was Fight Club. Fight Club, which is a beloved cult classic movie. It's looked at by so many people as one of the best movies of our generation, basically. A huge thing that people just adore. It bombed at the box office. Tomatoes, and it had very divisive reviews. There were people that absolutely loved it and said this is like a generation-defining movie, and then there were people that thought it was absolute garbage and trash. I love Fight Club. Fight Club is an astounding movie, you know?
Oh, it is.
I would never look at it as like, oh, that got like a 62% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it's garbage.
Same. Having watched Fight Club and also like loving Fight Club, I can also recognize how divisive of a film it is. That is that movie is very deliberately not a crowd pleaser.
Yeah. But that's also the point though, is that like, I think looking at a rating on Rotten Tomatoes and equating it in your mind with like a letter grade of going like, oh, it's 62%, that would be like a D on a test or something. That's the wrong way to look at it. You know, you should, what you should do is you should look at some of the positive and negative reviews.
Yeah, that's really going like besides the point here. Like what you said, like Fight Club, this is supposed to be a general audience crowd pleaser. This is supposed to be scientifically designed to make as many people as possible happy. Where Fight Club, that was definitely not the goal. The goal was to make art.
I'm not comparing it straight to that. I'm just saying in general, but you should always look at Rotten Tomato reviews.
My point in bringing up the Rotten Tomatoes score and the reviews wasn't to get in on like how that works. It was to basically point out the perceived quality of the film. What somebody who would just go on Rotten Tomatoes and look at that number would perceive and think about the movie based on that.
Yeah.
So I'm not commenting on the actual quality of the film. I have not seen it. You know, maybe it's a fantastic film. Who knows? But the perceived quality of the film is not good. That has a real tangible effect.
Yes, I agree with that. I just wanted to bring up the Rotten Tomatoes point because I think a lot of people misunderstand what Rotten Tomatoes is, you know?
Right. And I think that's the biggest issue that this film faced. And I don't think marketing was able to successfully overcome that, especially like...
They made a hard push into trying to compare it to Endgame, too.
At the end there. I just remember like watching the first trailer for this movie initially and just kind of like feeling pretty whelmed. Like they didn't even like go into like the plot or like is there a villain in this movie? Like it was kind of like really, really leaning hard into these characters, the three like leads. These characters are teaming up and they're power switching. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Which leads me to my second biggest problem with, which I think contributed to the box office that we're seeing is a result of Marvel and Disney's Disney Plus strategy of just filling that service with Marvel content backfiring, especially since like one of the big series that launched on Disney Plus, Miss Marvel, was meant as a lead-in to this film. It was kind of like to introduce you to that character who is like a major presence of this movie.
Yep.
And
another character in this movie was a B-plot in WandaVision, another Disney Plus show.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like, I think what happened here is like Miss Marvel wasn't a great show. It didn't perform on the level it should have to be a lead into this. Also, I want to
clarify on Miss Marvel just because a lot of the discourse about Miss Marvel is kind of divided into two. When we say it's not a good show, I think you and I both kind of agreed that like the thing that made Miss Marvel not a good show was basically the Marvel aspects of the show. The family stuff was fine. It was the villains. It was all that stuff.
It was the plotting. It was the plotting. It was very poorly plotted. It had, outside of Miss Marvel and her immediate family, it had weak support. It had weak characters. It felt like it was a rush, in a rush to get to the end of itself. There were all these like weird tropes. It just was a very, very uneven show.
Well, it felt like they had a comedic drama about a family that told a partition story. And all that was good. And then they said, okay, well, let's take that and make it Marvel. And then it was like, okay, now it's not good.
The idea I had, when thinking about this was it seemed to me like they wanted to make like a family sitcom focused on a Muslim family, but they were forced to insert all this superhero drama stuff into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
Yes.
Every time Marvel stuff comes up, it's like I started rolling my eyes. And I love Marvel, but it just does not work in this.
No, it does not work. And,
yeah.
And that's
the
a
stuff
problem.
about her being like a Marvel fangirl, all of that stuff works. But the actual...
Well, she's fantastic.
Yeah.
I will say that. She is fantastic.
But all the villains suck. It's just, none of that works. The plot doesn't work.
And that would be fine on its own, but the fact that this was supposed to be, a vehicle for this film, it was supposed to generate hype for this movie. You gotta put out better products if you want people to watch how you get hyped for the next thing.
Yeah.
Also, I think it doesn't help that there was a significant time gap between when Miss Marvel came out and this movie launched.
Yeah.
And so I think to me, those are the major factors that affected the box office of this film. I think we've just had too much Marvel recently.
Yeah, the dreaded Marvel fatigue plays a part as well.
And this wasn't coming out the gate as a must-see film in the first place.
Yep. That is it for our regular news stories. Next up, Netflix had an event called Geek Week, which they've done before, and they just showed a bunch of trailers and clips and all sorts of stuff from tons of shows they have coming up that they deemed as geeky. Some of the stuff didn't make any sense to be there. It wasn't really geeky at all. It just was shoehorned in there because it was something coming up from Netflix.
Yeah.
But a lot of it was on the geekier side, including a ton of animation. There was a bunch of animated stuff. But
they're all in on animation.
But there were some big things that people were really excited about that came from this Geek Week. The first thing is something that's an adaptation of a very popular animated series that neither Will or I have watched. And that is Avatar: The Last Airbender. People were losing their minds about this going into production. Will and I don't know anything about Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yes, I have very limited knowledge. I will say this though, if I'm comparing this in my head mentally to the M. Night Shyamalan film adaptation, this looks much, much better than that.
Yeah.
I haven't watched that movie for obvious reasons, but even not having watched this show,
just comparing it to the trailer,
just looking at this and looking at that, it's a night and day difference. So at least there's that for the fans of the series.
I've seen fans that have watched the trailer that were pretty excited about a lot of the stuff they were seeing in it too. So there's good signs. There's also, there's the hanging negativity about the fact that the original creators of Avatar: The Last Airbender were originally attached to this product, and then creative differences with Netflix.
Yes.
And they left it, which is a little dark cloud hovering over the whole project. But I know that I thought the trailer looked good, and people that were into the show that watched the trailer online, reactors and stuff that were watching the trailer online, seemed to actually be pretty psyched after watching the trailer. So it kind of looks like a lot of people are comparing it to One Piece in the sense that it's an adaptation that gets it right kind of thing. That's kind of what I've been seeing from people that are fans of Avatar. One other point of detail I wanted to bring up about this is that they're using the same technology that The Mandalorian uses on Disney Plus, where they're shooting on these sets. The ones that Disney Plus has is called Volume, and it's these virtual sets that are really kind of high tech. It's a new way of shooting things. Almost all the Star Wars Disney Plus stuff is shot in Volume. There have been a few movies shot in Volume as well. It's a way to cheaply create these really fantastic set pieces and stuff. And Mandalorian's the key prime example of that. Well, Netflix created their own kind of variation of a Volume set, and that is what Avatar is being filmed on. So that's something to point out just technology-wise. It's kind of interesting.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But I don't really have anything else to say about Avatar because I don't know anything about the series.
No, I think we're good on that topic.
Let's move on to an anime series that I do know a lot about. It's been a while, but I do know a lot about it, and it's getting a live-action adaptation, and that is Yu Yu Hakusho.
Well, it's one I watched up to the point that Cartoon Network aired episodes of. I think I watched to the middle of the Dark Tournament arc because that's literally where Cartoon Network cut off and started rerunning it from. So I remember really being really invested in it and going, oh crap, okay, what's gonna happen next? And then I tuned in the next day. It was the first episode again. I was like, what?
Yeah, it just took them a while to adapt it. I think the plan was to adapt more. I think they did. I think they did finish that arc. I think what they didn't do
I heard they
was
did,
the very last arc of the anime. I think they did not do that.
Which is a shame. I'm gonna have to hunt it down and actually finish the show some point, because I was really into it when it was on Cartoon Network.
I'm a big fan of the mangaka who did Yu Yu Hakusho. He's done some other stuff that I've liked as well. I did this one, I can't remember the name of it, but it was this alien that was staying with this guy. It was really funny. It was a really, really funny series.
Mm-hmm.
But he also did something called Hunter x Hunter, or Hunter x Hunter as it's often called. Which is a fantastic anime series and manga as well. So.
Oh, nice.
That's Tagashi is the mangaka who did all of that. He's excellent.
He's married to the mangaka who creates Sailor Moon.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. So.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
But Tagashi is kind of a legendary mangaka in Japan. He's very well respected and known. And he basically can do something that almost nobody can do with Shonen Jump, where he just kind of comes in every couple of years and he's like, oh, I got 10 more chapters of Hunter x Hunter. Do you want to release them? And Shonen's like, yeah, okay, sure.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Nobody does that but Tagashi. He's the only person who gets away with that. I mean, Ichiro Oda could probably get away with it if he wanted to. That's about it.
Akira Toriyama probably
he doesn't do anything anymore. He just has a studio that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
I think it's Dean Koontz or something, which is the author, where he doesn't actually really write that much. He has a factory of writers that make movies, and then they're just labeled as a Dean Koontz book. I think it's Dean Koontz. It might be somebody else, but it's like that with Toriyama. His stuff is just a committee or a team. It's not him anymore.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
But the Yu Yu Hakusho thing, it looks pretty good. It has that weird mid-budget Japanese anime adaptation look to it. And that's what it is.
That.
But that's exactly what it is. So we mentioned before when we were talking about One Piece and stuff that it's wow, they really took an anime adaptation and gave it a huge budget and put a lot of work and effort into it and stuff. But it's not the first time that an anime adaptation has been good. It was just the first time that a Western made anime adaptation had been good. Yeah. And I had mentioned before, there's all sorts of movies and shows in Japan that have done live action adaptations that are pretty good, Yeah. They're usually not big budget stuff, but they're still pretty good. Kenshin is a good example.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, this looks around that. It's a low budget, but still pretty good looking adaptation, from Japan.
Yeah, it looks pretty decent. Be interesting. Check it out.
Yep. Next up, we got a trailer. I think this was the reveal too. I don't think this was announced before, of The Witcher Sirens of the Deep.
Yeah, this
is
was
a new
reveal.
Is it a movie or is it a series?
I think this is just an animated film. I don't think this is supposed to be a series.
Kind of like the last one they did. They did another animated one.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
But this one, it follows Geralt of Rivia, and it's using the voice actor from the games, apparently.
Well, that's really cool. I like that.
I was actually curious. Before I heard that, I was like, oh, is this going to be Cavill, or is this going to be Hemsworth, or is this going to be some sound-alike, like they do with some of the What If actors,
Right, yeah.
But it's actually the game character, or the game voice actor, so.
Yeah, it's interesting they're doing that. We'll have to see how this turns out.
It looks good. I like the last animated movie, but I've kind of fallen off of Witcher. I didn't watch the last season. I didn't watch the other spin-off series.
Well, the content just hasn't been good, so.
Yeah. So I don't know. I might watch it. If it's just a movie, I might watch it just because it's a side story. I don't have to follow the rest of the plot for not good story.
Yeah, exactly.
And like I said, the last animated movie was actually pretty good.
And hopefully this is standalone. This isn't canon to television series, or you have to have been following the TV series. I'm just hoping this is on a standalone thing.
Yeah, me too. Just because, like I said, I'm kind of done with Witcher, the series,
Yeah, same, unfortunately.
Next thing we got at Geek Week was Dead Boy Detectives. This is from Neil Gaiman, which is an exciting thing. What this actually really reminded me of is, do you remember us talking about the trailer for, I don't think you ended up watching it. I did watch the show, but I don't think you did, but we talked about the trailer for a series called Lockwood & Co. You remember that? And
yeah, I remember that.
That's what this looks like to me. This looks a lot like Lockwood & Co.
So the Dead Boy Detectives are characters created by Neil Gaiman for DC Comics, originally for the Sandman. So they first appeared in Sandman issue 25. and I guess like they got their own comic series as well at some point. So this is what that's based off of.
Yeah. And it looks good. It just looks a lot like Lockwood & Co. I enjoyed Lockwood & Co. enough that I'm gonna probably check this out as well.
Yes,
it looks
Lockwood
like a fun,
Co.
It just looks like a fun, adventurous kind of modern fantasy.
If you dig it up, you realize
show.
like everything is a ripoff of Neil Gaiman. So Lockwood & Co. ripped off Neil Gaiman. Harry Potter ripped off Neil Gaiman.
Yeah. Supernatural ripped off Neil Gaiman.
Yes.
Famously.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'll watch it definitely. It looks like it's just going to be a fun kind of modern fantasy story set in, I think it's set in the UK. It looks like it's going to be fun. Next up, we got a trailer for a movie on Netflix called Damsel. This is the next project from Millie Bobby Brown, who has a good working relationship with Netflix over several projects.
Yeah.
Starting with Stranger Things, but also like the Enola Holmes series. And she's got that one that we talked about the news of that I like can't wait for. That's like, it's like a post-robot apocalypse movie, but it's like all like 80s themed. Like it's like 80s robot apocalypse themed.
Okay.
And it looks like really cool. And, that's coming up too, but that's not what this is. This is kind of reminds me a little bit of like Hulu had a movie that I think they ended up taking down for some reason that was like about this princess that was at the top of a tower and she had to like fight her way down. Instead of being a damsel in distress, she had to be the one that like fought her own way down and freed herself. And it was like an action movie in the vein of like The Raid. And this looks like that, not like in its overall tone and stuff, but in the sense that this is like a damsel in distress who has to kind of try to save herself instead of like wait to be saved. Because in this case, it looks like nobody's out to save her.
Well,
like, not just because they can't, but because they purposely sacrificed her or something.
Yeah. The plot is like they're sacrificing women to this dragon for whatever reason. That's the deal they made, and this is a story about one of the sacrifices fighting back and surviving, I guess.
One thing I will say about this trailer, fantastic song choice. Really set a lot of the mood.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's not a super well-known song, but it's just like a song about like, you hear the guy singing about like, you know, you better run from me, like I'm coming for you or something, and it's like, oh, it's just like so good. So fits with that. I think visually it looks pretty good. Really don't know much plot-wise besides the just base premise of them sacrificing damsels to this dragon. So who knows what the actual quality of the show is. Anything from you? Like, what do you think about this?
It looked pretty generic. I don't know. I don't care much about it.
I'm gonna watch it. I'm a big fantasy nut, so anything kind of fantasy I'm gonna try out at least.
Right.
But that is Damsel. The next thing we got was like the longest trailer and promotional thing we ever seen from Netflix in any of these promo things they've ever done. They just gave us so much information. We were just swimming in it. We just could not get away from it. That is Terminator, the anime series.
Oh, okay. I was like, what are you talking about? It's like,
They gave us two useful bits of information. One, that it exists, and two, that it's coming from Production IG.
Yep, that's it.
That's it. Production IG is great. They're an anime studio. They did the Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, done a lot of other stuff. They're a really good anime studio. And Terminator, really great IP, great property. And honestly, the movies are good, the first two. The rest of the movies haven't been good. But they did a TV series called The Sarah Connor Chronicles, which was excellent.
That was excellent. That was amazingly good. And
so the idea of like a story
seasons.
that's spread over like a show rather than a movie that's in the Terminator universe has already been proven to be something that can work.
Well, yeah.
So I'm excited about, this as an anime project from Production IG, and also because it's using the Terminator IP in a way that I think is probably going to be better than it's been used in any of the movies since the second.
We'll see. The jury's out. We'll see.
We'll see, but I'm excited. I think there's reason to be excited on this. Where as opposed to like if they may announce another Terminator movie, I wouldn't be excited at all.
It could be Production IG animating and the writers from Terminator Genesis writing the scripts.
And it's directed by Uwe Ball.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, hopefully it's good. Production IG is great. And the last big, partnership for a Western property with an anime company that Netflix did was Cyberpunk Edgerunners. And that was fantastic. So I have high hopes. We'll see though. Lastly, we got the trailer for Rebel Moon. And this is the moment in which all misogynists who despise James Gunn stood up with one and cheered for their new messiah.
Yeah, I guess. It looked kind of stupid.
Rebel Moon, for anybody who doesn't know, just very quickly, was pitched by Zack Snyder as like a Star Wars movie or series of Star Wars movies. Disney ended up passing on it. Zack took it to Netflix and changed it into this. It's a really high budget. It's a big commitment. It's like a multi-movie commitment. There's like there's other franchises. I think they're doing spin-offs and stuff as well that have already been planned. I mean, it's like a huge property.
It's literally like labeled part 1, and I'm thinking, oh, how presumptuous of you.
Well, I mean, we know that Zack Snyder stans are going to watch it like 30 times each, at least. Yeah. So it's just a matter of like, how vocal is that base versus how big is it, you know?
Yeah. I watched the trailer. I did not see anything interesting in this trailer. Like, it was like very like...
high production value.
yeah, high production value. There's that. And it was like very generic, like...
Yeah, I thought like the ship designs looked really boring and...
Yeah, ship designs look boring. The plot is like boring. It's like they're farmers on this planet, and then like the Empire comes down, and the one guy's like, "Oh, don't worry."
The Empire looks like Nazis. Yeah,
yeah, they look like Nazis, and then like the one farmer guy is like to the main character, like he says, "Oh, don't worry, we're just farmers. They don't care about us. They're not going to hurt us." And then spoilers, they slaughtered a bunch of farmers.
Yeah.
It's just like bad dialogue. And of course, the main character is like freaking John Wick, even though she's a farmer on this planet. Like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, to be fair,
there's probably more
the trailer that she was something else before she was a farmer.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, I feel the same way. Like, it looks very generic. It doesn't look that great.
Yeah.
I might watch it just because it's there. And like I said, I'm a big fantasy fan, and this isn't really fantasy. It's more sci-fi, but it still kind of fits somewhere in that wheelhouse, you know?
Yeah.
But if I watch it, that's why. It's not because I'm excited for it. It's just,
and also like overall, it didn't look visually appealing either.
Yeah, I mean, the production values looked really good, but the aesthetics were boring. Like
all like dull, muted colors.
Yeah, like a Zack Snyder movie.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. I'm not vibing with it, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Same here. And that is it for Netflix Geek Week. Lastly, we have 2 more trailers that happened to launch this week as well, outside of Geek Week. First up, we got a trailer for What If Season 2. I have to say, I'm gonna table this, or I'm gonna not table this. I'm gonna try to cover this delicately because I think What If sucks. I think What If was the worst thing that they did with the MCU.
Oh no, it was a huge disappointment.
Outside of episode 4, which was excellent, the rest of the series was trash. There were a few bits like in the first episode or second episode where it was like, there's some okay stuff, I guess, but I just don't like the way it went, and it just wasn't taking any risks or doing anything interesting. And then episode 4 was excellent, and then everything else was just trash after that. It was the worst. It is, if I do a ranking of like every MCU thing in exact order, it would be at the very bottom, even below Secret Invasion to me. It is the worst thing they've done for the MCU. But I mean, the trailer looked good.
If you
ignore the first season, the trailer looked good.
No, I agree that this looked positive. It looked good. I don't have any complaints. We'll have to see how the actual episodes shake out. Hopefully it's a big improvement from season 1.
Yeah.
I don't want to hate things.
I still don't know why they're also still doing, zombies.
That's a separate show, though.
Yeah, I know, but I still don't understand why that survived with all the stuff that's been canceled or rearranged in the MCU, that's still on the schedule.
Oh, yeah, I don't know either. No clue.
But, What If Season 2? I mean, hopefully it's good, but I don't have a lot of hope that it is. And then lastly, we got a trailer for Madam Web. This is the new Spider-Man connected thing from Sony, because Morbius wasn't bad enough. What did you think of Madam Web? You probably got the character than I did.
I know nothing about these characters. They suck.
My only understanding of Madam Web comes from the animated Spider-Man series.
Yes.
From the 90s or whatever.
It's hilarious. Sony in their logline for this calls it like a suspense thriller. Yeah, sure, whatever. There's nothing suspenseful or thrilling about this. I saw a tweet like basically calling it like a CW pilot, and yeah, this looks like something that would fit right in with the Arrowverse. Like,
here's the thing: like the first 3 Spider-Man movies, the third one being the worst of the 3, done by Sam Raimi with Tobey Maguire, those were all great. That I don't think that was really because of Sony. That was because of Sam Raimi.
Yeah,
you know. Then they did the Amazing Spider-Man movies. I didn't even bother watching those. I had just no interest in watching them. I heard the first one's okay.
I heard
the second one's garbage.
I still gotta watch them. You know, as hated as Spider-Man 3 is, you know, I could go by trailer of this movie alone. Like this makes Spider-Man 3 look like a masterpiece of the genre.
I think Spider-Man 3 was an example of too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
But again, like as I'm saying, like so then the next thing they did with the Spider-Man universe was that they were talking about doing Sinister Six and they never did. And then they said, okay, well now we're gonna do it, but with Marvel, and they did the Tom Holland trilogy. Those were all good. But those were good not because of Sony. Again, those were good because of Marvel, because they were in the MCU. That's why they were good. So you have basically what we've proven already with just the Spider-Man movies, not even going into any spin-offs or anything else, is that when Sam Raimi was involved, they were good. When he wasn't, they weren't good. When MCU got involved, they were good.
Yeah.
And then they did Venom. I watched the first 2 Venom movies. Not good. I didn't bother watching Morpheus. It looks atrocious. It was a laughing stock. And this looks like it's just in the same fucking thing. And then we have Kraven coming up looking like it's just as bad too. So I don't know. I think the only thing that Sony's done without Sam Raimi or the MCU that's good are the Spider-Verse movies, the animated ones. And that's because they had Lord and Miller.
Oh yeah.
That's what made those work.
Oh yeah, the Spider-Verse movies are amazing. They're also the biggest grossers for them. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry, but this movie is probably this movie's opening weekend is probably gonna make the Marvels look like a blockbuster.
See, I don't know, because Venom actually did well.
Yeah, but Venom's actually like a super popular character that people universally love.
True.
Yeah.
But, man, the Venom movie was trash. The sequel was also trash, and after the first movie, you'd think nobody would go see the second, but people did.
Also with Venom, like, as bad as, like, those movies are, we think those movies are, like, those actually had, like, very positive audience reactions. So.
Yeah. They had their moments. That's about what I can say about Venom. The movie sucked, but they had like a few fun moments in them and stuff.
Yeah, I think Tom Hardy does a lot of the heavy lifting for those films.
Yeah, both as himself and as the symbiote, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
But that is it for our news section, our very long news section that we had to get through this week. And that leaves only full spoilers. This week on Full Spoilers, we are talking about Loki Season 2. So right off the bat, Loki was your favorite of the Disney Plus shows, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Loki is
my second favorite below WandaVision, but it was up there. Like to me, when I think about the MCU Marvel stuff that's good, or the MCU Disney Plus stuff that's good, I think of 4 things basically. Loki, WandaVision, the Guardians Christmas special, and Werewolf by Night.
Yes, those were the high points.
Everything else was like a huge gulf between them.
For me, like, Season 2 cements it. Loki is the best thing Marvel made for Disney Plus so far.
I still prefer WandaVision, but I definitely really enjoyed Loki.
The ending to Loki, the ending they had, it's perfect. It's immaculate. That is like, if we never see Loki again, that was the perfect ending to his character.
Yeah, I think it's really good. I think the one thing that Loki does a lot better than WandaVision is stick the landing. I think that was the problem with WandaVision. I think lockdown and COVID and stuff played a big part in sticking the landing.
I think we talked about this before, but there seems to be like a tendency of demanding there be like some big superhero fight, and like, because WandaVision obviously had like the big fight with Agatha. We also saw in Secret Invasion, like there had to be like this big Super Skrull fight at the end of it.
You hated it, but She-Hulk made fun of the whole concept of it.
Yeah, She-Hulk, made fun. I think Loki not having to have some big battle as its climax, really helped it, because it wouldn't have made sense anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. I think it was really good. I think the one issue I have with season 2 of Loki is that when you take a step back and you look at the entire thing, it's all them coping with the decision at the end of season 1. The entire season 2. They don't, get past that issue and then face something else. It's all about that one thing at the very end of season 1. Trying to correct that is the entire season of season 2. So there's, that's, to me is a little bit negative because it feels like, wow, it really didn't go anywhere new beyond that,
No, it's not negative because it's one story, it's connected. It's basically how, that choice, that action, endangered all of reality.
Yeah, I agree, but what I'm saying is that, from a long view, there was more to season 1 than just how it ended. There was, some mystery, there was intrigue, there was things that were built to, there was development that happened and stuff like that. And Loki season 2, as excellent as everything is in it, and I think it is an excellent series, when you really take a look at it, the entire thing is a reaction to the last, 5 minutes of the first season of Loki. So it's an entire season reacting to the last 5 minutes of the first season. That's kind of the negative I have about Loki. Now again, like I said, I still loved Loki season 2. I think episode 4 in particular was amazing. I think the finale was great as well. I think there's a lot of stuff they did really well. I've heard somebody that didn't like Victor Timely and his tics and stutters and stuff. I thought he was great. I think as for all the shit about Jonathan Majors, whatever's true, whatever's not, we're not going to get into that.
No, no. I mean, he is a fantastic actor.
Yeah, he's a fantastic actor. And the fact that he has made all of these different versions of Kang that feel like different people.
I mean, I said this when we talked about Quantumania, his performance was one of the best things about that movie.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. It's, he has portrayed every version of Kang that he's had time to deal with. I'm not counting the giant council of Kangs at the end of Quantumania.
Oh, yeah.
But everyone that he's had actual time to develop version of Kang, it's always very different. It feels like a completely different person. And I think there's something impressive about that. I heard somebody that they didn't like, the stutter and just thought he was annoying and stuff. I'm like, no, that's his character. It's an interesting character to me. I thought it was a good variation on Kang. And I like the way it was used in this season.
Oh, same, absolutely.
I think the addition of Obi was great too.
Obi was fantastic. Love Obi.
He's one of the most likable actors, period, in the industry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Ke Kwan is fantastic. I love the concept of going deeper into characters, seeing Mobius's life on the timeline.
Oh, finally saw him with the jet ski.
Yeah, finally saw him with the jet ski, yeah.
That was pretty funny with the whole, the shooting thing so that they could, you could film yourself riding on the jet ski with the fans blowing on you and stuff. That was really funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
Eugene with the Alcatraz thing was interesting. They didn't really explore it that much, but it was still interesting.
No, they didn't. Yeah, it was interesting just seeing, where everybody is on the various timelines. Mm-hmm. Where their lives are. There was a couple things. One criticism I had, it seemed like it was going in one direction halfway through the season, then went another, with all the stuff about Renslayer and Miss Minutes and...
she kind of disappeared halfway through.
Well, yeah, she did disappear, Loki pruned her, but
yeah, she was disappeared halfway through.
Yeah, she was just... That didn't really factor in as much as, I thought it was going to. The whole stuff about the rebellion from, the TVA soldiers. I'm blanking on what they're called off the top of my head. But the ones who,
Hunters.
Yeah, the hunters. Yeah, the hunters that were, going against the new, regime of the TVA and were, imprisoned. Renslayer, ends up killing them in, a pretty horrific way, by the way.
By the way, that smile that came on Miss Minutes' face as they were getting crushed, I just immediately, and it's because I watched it recently, but I was like, Chucky?
Yeah, Chucky.
That was a straight up Chucky reaction.
Oh, yes, it was. Miss Minutes was loving every second of that. She's a complete sociopath.
Yeah, Miss Minutes in episode 4 was fantastic. The moment when they turned her off, and you see her all a glitched out version of herself, and then she's like,
yeah.
She kind of curses them out, not curses, but kind of tells them off and then disappears.
Yeah.
It was that was awesome. Like I said, you mentioned the finale and how good it was. So I think episode 4 was the standout for me. That was like such a good
that was a standout. But ultimately the season was about Loki and his journey and his character arc, going from, and they had the wonderful scene where he time slipped back into the scene from like the early in the first season after like Mobius had just started talking to him at the TVA. I was going. And that moment when, like, Loki time slips and he talks to Mobius as, like, the Loki from the future was a fantastic scene. Mm-hmm. And there was just, like, this great scene, like, where Loki is talking to Sylvie in her timeline, He's trying to convince Sylvie to, to help him, to not kill Kang at the end of time so he can save time. She's not interested, but, like, she asks him, like, what he truthfully wants, and he wants his friends. He's come to realize that the TVA, the people in the TVA are his friends, and that's what he wants more than anything in the world.
Yeah, I think they did. I think the thing that makes people really happy about Loki season 2 in general is that Loki's development is really good in it,
Yes, it is.
I think there is some criticism to be had that they didn't really do much with Sylvie, that they didn't really do that much with Mobius, not Mobius.
Even though, Mobius does get some great moments, but I mean, that's kind of missing, that's missing the point that the show ultimately, it's about Loki's journey, and so it's kind of like, they didn't do much with Sylvie, but, like, it's not about her at the end of the day.
You had Hunter B-15, who was a deal in the first season, had a big arc and a lot of development, really wasn't used that much in this season at all.
Yeah.
She could get to the heart of her character this season, but like there wasn't much beyond that. Like she didn't really have an arc besides that. So there are things that it feels almost like maybe this should have been a little bit longer of a season.
Well, maybe
to try to get in some more of those beats.
I think those beats are ultimately unnecessary. I think like this was focused and it knew what it was focused on, and I think like that's important.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that like the Loki story is fantastic and that's what was important, but it just kind of felt like there was stuff set up for the other characters in the first season, and it just kind of like pushed it.
Maybe Marvel can do something with that. Like maybe they can make like a TVA series or something. Who knows?
Yeah.
There's no telling. Nobody ever said like anything was the end. Like even for Loki, like there's no definitive statement that Marvel's done with that character. Even
Tom Hiddleston said that it was.
He said it felt like a conclusion to 14 years of his life, but he never definitively like stated. He said, like Marvel could still do stuff with Loki, and like if they asked him to come back, he would.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about for Loki?
Just say like the ending where he takes his place on the throne as the keeper of time at the end of the world again.
Perfectly titled episode, by the way, Glorious Purpose.
Yes, because he discovered his glorious purpose, right?
Yes. He did have glorious purpose all along. It just wasn't
that final shot of Loki again it's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's all I have to say about Loki. Fantastic show.
What do you think about all the McDonald's stuff?
I'm loving it.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
It actually did feel like very intrusive, so like that's good.
I think because it was era appropriate, like it wasn't modern McDonald's, it was because it had like an aesthetic to it of an old McDonald's. I think that's what made it work,
Right, yeah, exactly.
I think if she was just in a straight up modern McDonald's, it would be like, what? It would feel a little weird, but because it was era appropriate and stuff, like it kind of worked. That's it for Loki, though. Next week, we are off because it is Thanksgiving next week. But the week after that, we are going to be back to talk about Pluto, which is an anime series based on Astro Boy, but reimagined and on Netflix. It's 8, I believe, hour-long episodes, and that is all up right now on Netflix for you to watch. And we will be talking about that when we come back in 2 weeks.
It's an anime adaptation of a manga, because Pluto was a serialized manga.
Yes.
Before this, yeah.
And that manga is an adaptation of Astro Boy.
Yes.
So.
It's an adaptation, specifically the first story arc of the original Astro Boy story, which is the greatest robot in the world. It's a reimagining of that storyline.
Mm-hmm. With like a deeper, more psychological bent to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm excited to talk about that. They're all hour-long episodes, which is very rare for anime. But check that out on Netflix and join in on our discussion in 2 weeks. Thank you, everybody, for listening. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can follow Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our website, thetotalscreen.com. If you go to our website and open up a container story to the podcast, to any of the episodes of the podcast, and scroll down to that last paragraph, you'll find all of the relevant links to our social accounts and the RSS feed for the podcast, everything you need. It's all there. So check that out. You can also subscribe to this podcast through any podcast client of choice like Apple Podcasts or Pocket Cast, and the entire backlog of our podcast is also available on our YouTube channel, as well as old content from days ago. So check that out. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to the OnScreen podcast, the official podcast of The Total Screen. Visit our website at thetotalscreen.com. This podcast can be found on any major podcast client, including Pocket Cast and Apple Podcast. The entire backlog of this podcast and other content can be found on our YouTube channel.